Okay, so here we are. Hello all. Good afternoon to all our viewers joining from US and Canada. A very good evening to all our viewers joining from Asia, and respective greetings to all other participants as well. It's such a pleasure to have you all with us. And for today's session, we have with us Mr. Scott Fox from OC Startup Council. We have Travis Howerton from C2 Labs. We have Zefeng Zhang from RSVP.ai and Priyank Khandelwal from Photon Legal. A warm welcome to all of you, and we really appreciate you taking out your time and being with us.
Thank you so
So
much.
I'll briefly introduce all our speakers now. Yeah, welcome. So let's begin with Scott. Scott is a serial entrepreneur. He's a former investment banker. He's three-time best-selling author and also an angel investor. Scott has founded, coached, invested in hundreds of startup ventures of all different sizes. His diverse expertise forms the basis of his three best-selling books, which we just saw, and you can also see in his background right now. Scott focuses mostly on early stage software companies which have high growth potential. And at Startup Council is a community service group promoting access to entrepreneurship and startup ecosystem. To add to this, he is a graduate from the University of Michigan and the Stanford Law School, and also a popular radio and podcast guest. Delighted to have you with us, Scott. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Sure. Our next speaker for this session is Travis Howerton. Travis has been is the co-founder and chief technology officer at C2 Labs. He is primarily responsible for the research and development division that develops innovative products and services to solve customers' most difficult challenges. He so He's also the organization partners to blend art and science together to enable their customers to expand their vision and drive cultural change. Before C2 Labs, Travis was associated as Global Director for Strategic Programs at Bechtel Corporation, where he was involved in various mergers, cost savings, and transformation programs at Consolidated Nuclear Security. That's really interesting. Even prior to Bechtel, Travis had a long career consisting of diverse senior executive assignments for the US Department of Energy, and he has also served as Deputy Director for IT Services Division at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So no points for guessing that Travis holds multiple certifications. He's an accomplished public speaker. He has authored more than 50 publications to his credit, and he supports various nonprofit associations and educational institutions as a board member. So glad to have you, Travis. Thanks for being part of our session.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Moving on to our third speaker, Zefeng Zhang. He's the Chief Technology Officer at RSVP.ai, which is a Canada-based natural language understanding platform for retail customers and quality control fields. Some of the deep natural language understanding services are around smart home, smart toys, smart medical, and smart education services. Prior to being the CTO, he also served as Vice President and Principal Software Architect at RSVP.ai. And even before that, he has worked as Senior Software Architect and also a research scientist at Bioinformatics Solutions, Inc. That's really interesting. And so to add to it, Zefeng has master's degree in artificial intelligence, multiple agent systems, and robotics from the University of Science and Technology of China. And his other interests include biologics and biosimilars. So thank you so much for being with us, Zefeng. Looking
It's
forward
my
to know
honor to
more
be
about it.
here. It's my honor to be here.
Thank you. Sure. And moving to our final speaker for the session, whom I know a bit, is Priyank Khandelwal. Priyank Khandelwal is the founding partner at Photon Legal and a qualified patent agent who has experience of more than 5 years in business entrepreneurship, security, and intellectual property. In his experience so far, Priyank has relentlessly focused on simplifying complex intellectual property issues and finding non-existent solutions to undefined problems. Apart from that, he also serves as Vice President of the Indian Lawyers Association, Pune. Before Photon Legal, Priyank has practiced in IP for more than 3 years. He has also briefly worked as data evangelist at Mahindra Comviva. And to add more about his technical background, he's an information technology engineer from the College of Engineering, Pune. He's also completed multiple certifications from the Tel Aviv University on cybersecurity and business entrepreneurship, which are clearly his interests. So thank you for joining us, Priyank.
Thank you so much, Vaishnavi, for the warm welcome.
Okay, so we're done with the introductions, and that's how diverse and talented our today's panel is. Now, to briefly introduce myself, I'm Vaishnavi Joshi. I work as an intellectual property senior scientist at Photon Legal. I've been in this field for more than 6 years now, and technically I've done my master's in biotechnology. So with that, let's begin the show. So here comes my first question, and I would like to begin with Travis. So Travis, while doing my research about you, there's one interesting thing which I found on your profile, and that was your very precise and interesting bio, which comprises of only few words. I mean, I've seen people who have paragraphs in their profile, but Travis chose to keep it very simple, and I would like to read it to all of you. So his bio read: a dad, a developer, a technology enthusiast, a golfer, a gamer, and digital transformation specialist. Now that's amazing. So Travis, could you please shed some light about your whole journey and the story behind gaining so many titles at once? Over to you.
Sure. So a little bit about sort of the background of how I got to C2 Labs. So I started as a technologist, like everyone on this call, classically trained computer scientist, was software engineer, got involved with some things early on in my career and did some high profile development stuff that got me to be a CIO at a very young age. Ended up going to headquarters where I was a chief technology officer for the U.S. Nuclear weapons program. And so it's over sort of IT, cyber engineering across the national labs and plants. Did that for a while. Ended up on a plane a lot more than my family was happy with. And you'll notice my bio started with dad. So that's important to me to be home. So came back to Oak Ridge, took a CIO type role at Oak Ridge National Lab. Got recruited by Bechtel to come back to the weapons program and consolidate nuclear manufacturing for the country. And so we were on the hook to try to save the government a couple of $1 billion by consolidating processes and systems and manufacturing processes across the sites. Did that for a while and took a role with Bechtel where I got to help them modernize construction sites and do technology strategy and other things across construction sites in 27 countries. But I also ended up right back on a plane 40 something weeks a year, which my family still didn't like. And so everywhere I've gone on my journey, I've kind of run into the same thing as a technology evangelist and someone who likes to solve business problems with technology, is that compliance is the equal and opposite force to digital transformation. You want to go put technologies in place, you want to do new things, but there's always someone with a requirement or set of requirements that's going to help you in a way that's completely unhelpful. Have you thought about all these additional requirements you've never heard of that are going to blow up your project schedule and take forever and cost a ton of money that you hadn't planned on to do? And we just thought that there's got to be a better way to do this. And so we've come along, and our sort of tagline is RegOps, of bringing DevOps to compliance, the same methodologies and skill sets that we use to automate a lot of how we deploy technology could be leveraged to automate how we build compliance artifacts. So in a cloud world, an IoT world, increasingly you're able to get a lot of data around compliance that what if the paperwork just updated itself as a natural function of doing the job. And so we've built a next generation sort of compliance platform that does that. And so my role is working with the technologists and my fellow nerds in C2 and our customers to try to solve these problems for some very large companies and see if we can lower their costs, reduce their risk, and help them innovate faster. And so that's how I got here today.
Wonderful, wonderful. And thanks for sharing that story with us, Travis. Looking forward to know more about you. Moving on to Scott. So Scott, please tell us a bit more about your journey so far. There are also multiple hats which you're donning and managing so well. So how exactly did the OC Startup Council happen to you? And what do you exactly work startups with, which makes their life pretty easier, I'm sure. So over to you, Scott. Thanks.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I'm a serial entrepreneur, as mentioned in my bio. And these days I spend most of my time as an investor and a mentor and advisor to early stage startups. For a long time, well, 20 plus years, I've been doing this. I raised my first venture round during the first .com boom. So I've been doing this for a long time. And at this point, I'm really interested more in helping other people understand the opportunities that are available as entrepreneurs. Because honestly, I'm frustrated with how the world is working. It's not working as well as it should, and the politicians aren't going to do the job. I think entrepreneurs are the source of optimism and getting things done that we need. So I am personally on a mission to just help more people understand the opportunities for not just making money, but making a difference in the world by building companies that can create jobs and tax flow and deal opportunities and investment opportunities. And I'm kind of a rising tide lifts all the boats kind of guy. And as you mentioned, that's why I wrote these books. Only 3 of those are in English. The rest are translations. But I started writing books about 15 years ago, trying to introduce people who might not have been traditionally involved in the internet or the entrepreneurship or the venture capital worlds to let them in, because there's just such a wave of opportunity. And that's one of the reasons I was pleased to be with you here today, because obviously you guys are based in Mumbai, and the opportunities that are emerging in India are just staggeringly exciting.
Yes.
And just as we've seen in the States, right? So I've seen this movie before and I like the ending. So I'm hoping to spread that to other folks. So the Startup Council is basically a community service group that I've started to try to help more early stage entrepreneurs figure out how to get onto the information superhighway, to use that old metaphor. There are lots of things going on, but if you are not raised, with a wealthy family or with the right connections or having gone to the right schools, it can be terribly difficult. And even if you have all those things, it's still hard work, right? So I think those of us who have gotten somewhere need to help others. And that's why I'm here today, to see if I can help reach some of the people that you guys reach, to learn more about the world of investing and startup founding and growth. So there.
Wow, that's really great. And what a great statement made by Scott, that entrepreneurs are source to optimism. I think that's a very wonderful key takeaway from his answer. Moving to Zafang. So Zafang, you completed your education in China and then you decided to move to Canada. And I think that is where your professional journey really began. So could you please tell us a bit more of your story, as in how was the transition for you and how it worked for you professionally?
Sure, it's my honor to be here. So thanks. So after I graduated from the PhD study in biomedics and the computational biology, I was actually a technician guy. I was doing lots of peak works and try to pursue the high performance computational and the very polished algorithms inside even some theoretical aspect of the problems. So after that, I figured out that in order to contribute more to the society, or try to land your theoretical to the ground and make it more practical and useful in the real world, I think better I will try into the industry field. And at that time, well, I moved to Canada because one of my professors was trying to do some acceleration work for a company which was divided from two joint work of two universities. So I think it's a good chance we will do some industrial work here. So the first field I was stepped in was the biological part, like the antibody stuff, the discovery, mass spectrometry stuff, and do the drug discovery stuff. So collaborate with the wet labs and do the data analysis, discover patterns, write the high performance algorithm and pipelines to filter out the candidates, those stuff. And those has like a very good potential in the drug discovery field. And then the majority trend is that this retail service and was like going online and grows exponentially. And so lots of compared to this vast improvement of the technologies, the other side is lots of people are actually not very adapted to this gap in the between. So I was focusing on the natural language part because that might be a good way of bridging the people, how they use the knowledge they know and try to seek the information they want from this information. So I was trying to do this in the small startup here in Canada. Several of us was interested in this field. And after that, we figured out that this actually has lots of potential in the retail services. Consider even now when the pandemic stuff happens, lots of offline stores and just moved to the online, including the retail and even the educational. My kids was in the offline schools, has to learn everything online now. So we know that this is a very great potential in this field about the how we use the natural language to do the information retrieval. We want to get the information as fast as possible and as accurate as possible. So even the customer profiling was main focus of how you to attract the profit and margins into your desired field. So this moves to my company's desire, and we try to fill this gap in this current this situation. And our main target was actually the B2B models, because our company is still small. We cannot afford lots of marketing and the human resource staff to do the 2C part. So we are trying to collaborate with the middle to large size of the company, lots of in the mainland China, some in the Canada locally. And we try to collaborate with them to expand their own field, to inject our technology into their pipelines and the like CRM stuff to do that, to boost their performance and cut their labor cost. So this is our main focus and the interest now. Thank you.
Oh, wow. That's really very interesting to know. And thanks for sharing your journey with us. Looking forward to know more about you. So now moving on to Priyank with his first question. So Priyank, I always wanted to ask you that what motivated you, or rather what inclined you to become an entrepreneur at such young age? And I'm saying young age because that is where many of your fellow colleagues try to secure their jobs and move up the hierarchy ladder in their previous or particular organizations. So what was your motivation and how you zeroed in on being an entrepreneur?
Excellent question. So see, one of the key things which I always believed in was, or rather, it's part of who I am, is basically to help others. if you know something and if you can share that knowledge or that piece of advice with anybody who's in need, then of course that guy will fly. And I always believed in this. And when I was working uh, in the previous office, what I encountered is whatever piece of advice we used to give to our clients or our fellow peers, that advice used to be very useful and people used to appreciate that. But over the period of time, I also realized that even though I wish to always go an extra mile and help out all of my clients with all of their needs, there was certain resistance because of the position which I was having. The kind of management approach was there to not go out to that extra mile because that was outside my reach or not in my domain. But I always wanted to help my clients out or fellow people around me. So I thought if an employment is not allowing me that, if I go on my own, start my own journey, I would definitely be totally on my own and nobody can stop me. Uh, but at the same time, as you rightly mentioned, the people of my, or rather my friends or my colleagues of my same age or from the same colleges, they are, of course, ranking up the order, achieving great milestones in their respective career. Uh, but I thought, I mean, it's gonna be, of course, a risk situation, right? The moment an entrepreneur thinks about starting its own journey, it's all about risk. You have to, of course, measure on the potential of your idea and truly believe in yourself. And I always believe myself that okay, no matter the situation comes, you can of course face the situation with a gracious smile on your face, and nothing will happen. So trust in yourself, have a belief in yourself, and be obsessive about the passion is what I've learned from my mentors and my parents, and that's what always keeps me motivating to go out an extra mile and help my colleagues around or people around me.
Wow. That was an interesting answer. So basically, expanding your horizons, believing in yourself, and finding something which you're truly passionate about can help you to become an entrepreneur. And I think this is definitely a very useful message for all our millennial wannabe entrepreneurs, and they will surely relate to you, I'm sure. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. So I would again like to go to Scott now. So Scott, you have been a former investment banker as well. And then you also, as you mentioned, 13 years back, probably you started writing and also working with startups, and thereon you presently you're angel investor. But what inspired you to write? I mean, you were directly helping your clients previously also. So, what motivated you to write and reach a greater audience? And as you rightly said, your three books. So Scott has three best-selling books, and they have been translated into several other languages as well. So. What was the eureka moment for you, Scott, that you decided I can also be an author?
Well, thanks for asking. It was kind of what Priyank was saying. I like to help people, and I just found that so many entrepreneurs, they fall into the trap of the media's version of startup land, which is I have an idea, I meet somebody randomly, and they give me $1 million, and then I go public 3 weeks later. Wow, I'm rich. I'm an entrepreneur, right? And it's just not true. It's a lot of work. There's a certain amount of luck, but it's mostly work. But the work is a lot more efficient if you have some idea of what you're doing, like any other field. And I wanted to help people figure this out. So one time I was on the phone, and a friend of mine called me, and she said she had an idea for a mobile app. And she said, what do you think about this? And she laid out this scenario. And then I started talking. And I talked for almost 40 minutes with hardly out of breath. And at the end, there was silence. And I said, Lucy, are you there? Are you there? And I thought she hung up. I wasted my time. I said, yeah, I'm here. You should write a book. It's like, so that's what I did, right? So I just realized I had so many calls like that and so many people that I met, and my books are I love my books. Obviously I invested a lot of time in them, but they're not the only books. There are lots of books out there, right? But the real idea is to find somebody who's done this before. So many entrepreneurs get an idea and they're so convinced that they're right that they charge ahead without understanding the landscape and the opportunities and the challenges that are going to face them. And with just a little bit of education and mentorship, it can be a lot easier, and you have a much better chance at that profitable exit. So that's what the books are. They're virtual mentorship, trying to help people who I'll never meet in languages that I don't speak to figure out that there's opportunity for them in the digital world too. And there is, obviously those books are, even the newest one is almost 10 years old. So obviously I was right in the sense that there's opportunity, right? But I'd encourage everybody here to get out there and read books or soak up what you can, but then go do it. Reading the book is not the same as building the company. Go build the company, meet some customers, make some money, that sort of thing. But some guidance on the early parts is why I write. So thanks for asking.
Wonderful. Good to know. I want to put my next question to Travis. Travis, as you mentioned, you have worked with the US Department of Energy. You have later on worked with Oak Ridge Laboratory and also the corporate sector for a reasonable time. So you've seen it all, right? From government sector to corporate sector, and now at everything at C2 Labs. So my question to you is, so what do you think startups or even some bigger organizations, when they try to bring in innovative solutions that would change people's lives in a good way, what are the challenges that such organizations face in early stages?
I'll give you sort of 3 things that I think are really important there. And before I go to those, I'll say all those experiences I think are valuable. There's a lot of people who like to bash the government, and at times for good reason. I agree with it. But also there are parts of the government that are great, where the mission and the number of people you can touch is amazing. The amount of responsibility you get at an early age, you won't find in the private sector. So there's a lot of good stuff. And so one of the things I tell people is it's important to have diversity in your background, not just on your team, because you bring all those experiences to the table of what works well, because no organization is 100% good or 100% bad. You learn things from all of them that you can bring to your next engagement. So I think that diversity of experience is important. The other thing is the world's full of people who say no. It's easy to say no. It's easy to say something's impossible. Everything was impossible until somebody did it. And so when you take that no, what you're doing is letting somebody put a box on you that's going to define how far you can go. And if you think truly something can be done and should be done, I tell people don't let them put boxes on you. It's sort of one of the top things. The next thing I like to tell people is assume you know nothing. So when you're playing in innovation space, you get a lot of people who want to build a massive Microsoft project schedule that plans out the next 2 years of their life. That's not how innovation works. And so if you've not read the Lean Startup book, I highly recommend that to everybody. Go test hypotheses, figure out what you think, and then go run a set of measured experiments where you can learn and validate what it is you're trying to do, because you are wrong about a lot of things you think. If it's truly innovative, there's a lot of unknowns, and very few people are good enough to guess everything right up front. So if you can sort of start small of here's the things I need to learn to prove out, if I solve this problem, is it really going to make a big difference? Maybe the difference is bigger than you thought it was. Maybe nobody even has this problem and you're wasting your time, right? Figure those things out early and small and fast, because as a startup, you don't have a lot of money. And so you don't have a lot of time to spin your wheels making bad bets that are hard to course correct when you spend a lot of time and energy on it. So learn fast and upfront. The last thing I tell people is fall in love with your customer's problem. Way too many folks fall in love with their own tech and their approach, but they can't relate it to an actual business problem somebody has, so they have trouble selling it. or they get competition obsessed, where they look at a matrix of what they can do feature wise that others can't. And it sort of causes two problems. If you're just like somebody else, it's a race to the bottom on price. And if you're just trying to do minor features to something, maybe the other company didn't do it because there's no customers for that feature and they already know that and you don't, right? And so it's, I say fall in love with customers' problems, because if a customer has a problem and your technology, your company can solve it, there's going to be a market for that. So if you can price that at a point that's less than the pain they feel in this problem, you're starting to build a repeatable business model, assuming that there's lots of people with the same problem, right? And so those are sort of the major advice things I give people. You know, there's all sorts of things you learn along the way that you think you're smart on, that the market and customers will educate you on. And so the faster you can learn and cycle and improve and solve customer problems, I think the more successful you'll be, regardless of industry or what area you're focused in.
Wow. So those are, I think, that's the secret formula for success, which Travis has rightly put out there. Allow me to summarize it. So diversity of experience is important. Everything was impossible until someone did it. Assume nothing and go have a go-to test hypothesis. And fall in love with your customers' requirements. Wow, that just makes probably the 5 most important and simplest rules to understand. So thank you very much for simplifying this for us, Travis. I'm sure audience is going to find it really useful.
You're welcome.
Moving on to Zafang. So Zafang, in view of our theme for today's webinar, I would like to ask you, how would you advise young entrepreneurs or startups or small and medium-sized enterprises who might be seeking investments, and has RSVP.ai ever sought investment or underwent funding? So what was your experience about that? Basically, I want to know some tips for entrepreneurs in getting the right funding for their startups and protecting their intellectual property at the same time.
Okay, so thank you for the question. First, I'd like to add my 2 cents to Travis' the answers. So actually, I think Travis has made a very good point about these fast iterations about startups. This is very important because for the medium to large companies, you have this profit or the funding pools to support a long-term researches or very golden standard software and standard, so that you can have a pretty longer time for developing a very beautiful product or software or pipeline stuff. But for the startups, this is not true, because for the startups, all you do is that you have a very sparkling idea in a very tiny points, and you are focusing on a plan of the vast which you is unknown and you haven't stepped into. When you get that problem, you know what the problem is, and it's beyond your imagination. And what you can do is try to bring this real problem and difficult insight by do a fast iteration from your customer service, the feedback, the data, their requirements, their problems, and you try to merge the gap between your imagination and your plotting. So quickly adapt your plotting and the pipeline and even your way of the management and the architecture design to fit into that the real scenario. So this is very important for fast pacing stuff. So I think Travis made a very good point, and that's my added of the 2 cents. And back to the problem of how a startup should look at the investments. This is a very good question, because investors look at the startups at different ways. Some investors look at them, I think is, well, I'm not an expert of this part, but on my side of view, to look at the investments, they look at the potentials. Some look at the how I can get the market profit view. There is a balance of this, how I can extract the most profit of a startup, of how I can grow this startup to the even bigger one, so that I can try to raise it until I can make to do the final harvest or do something later. So this is a two different scenario of this part. When the startup look at the investor, I think one very important aspect is that how are you going to look at the startup's own resources? Because when a startup, they are when they're very young, so this field is pretty big, and you want to grow it in next 18 months in exponential index. So you have to utilize the resources, every resource you can. And sometimes investors can bring the resources you needed, because those resources can take you longer than you think the time to accumulate, to build relationships, to collect orders with the customers, or even has knowing knowledge in the extensive related fields, so that those resources brought in by the investor itself can be very beneficial to the startups. So this is one part. The second part is that try to understand what the investors really they are looking for. Are they trying to grow your startup to a certain stage, try to sell it to another bigger company, or are you trying to really look at what's your strength of this startup, and what's the weakness of the startup? Was it has a potential to grow into a full cycle, and with our aspect can stand alone and try to grow by itself stuff. So this is what you expect you need to do to see a best fit for your startup, the long-term strategy versus the goal of the investors. So that's my 2 points of the things I had to point out. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for simplifying it further for us and sharing those most important 2 points with us. So, I would like to tap a question on that to Scott. So, Scott, I'm sure you've seen hundreds of startups which have been going through these phases and the challenges which we just discussed, and the answers which Travis and Zefeng have shared with us. So, over the years. What do you think? I mean, what exactly should be the correct approach to seek a right company valuation as well as gain the right amount of investment? Your perspective, being an angel investor as well as a serial entrepreneur, that is one. And second question, has there been any change in your perspective because of the current pandemic situation which we are having in place? So would that change how you look at startups before investing? If you could please share your thoughts. Thanks.
Sure. How much time do you have? Might have to write another book. Good question. Yeah, valuation and the amount raised is always difficult. A lot of the answer for that depends on the stage of the startup. If you're a Series C stage startup, for example, you have significant revenue already, it's much easier to develop a valuation based on your existing revenues and growth to date, that sort of thing. And of course, based on the amount of previous capital you've raised and the dilution that additional capital would add to the founders and the current shareholders. Where it's really challenging, and I think what you're driving at, and where I spend most of my time also, is with the early stage startups, seed stage startups, where they may not have much or any revenue. They mostly may have an idea or a proof of concept sort of developed. And without revenue, it's hard to forecast anything, right? So there's not an easy answer to this. There's a number of different theories out there that anybody could Google. A good one is Dave Berkus, Berkonomics, who has theories about this that you can find online. That's Berkus. And there are many others based on the multiples of revenue or multiples of profit, or et cetera, et cetera. What it boils down to, though, I think, is most early stage startups, at least in the software world where I work, I'm not talking about automobiles or hardware or biotech, things I know less about, but at least in the software world, most early stage startups are valued, say, between $2 and $4 million when they get started. and you work backwards in partnership with your first investors to figure out what an appropriate amount is for them to receive in terms of ownership relative to what they're putting in and what you're putting in. And there's no, unfortunately, there's no known calculation, no established Pythagorean theorem sort of thing where you can just say A plus B equals C. It's a negotiation every time, as it should be, and you need to look at the growth forecasts, and this is where entrepreneurs and investors often bump heads, because of course the entrepreneur thinks they're going to take over the world in 6 weeks, and the investors generally have a little more experience and are concerned that it may take a little longer than 6 weeks, and it may take a lot more capital than they forecast. So a longer discussion is necessary. This is one of the things I should mention, by the way. The books are something I've done for a long time. What I do these days is I run monthly workshops on this kind of stuff. So masterminds, I run masterminds workshops, mastermind startup accelerator workshops, and these are easy to find online. You can look at mastermindsworkshops.com if you'd like, or just Google it, it'll come up. And this segues into your pandemic question. These used to be just local here in Southern California, face-to-face, but now they're like everything else, like this panel, they're virtual online. So every month we do this, and I get entrepreneurs from all over the world, and we talk through things like this in a helpful, friendly environment. So if that sounds interesting to anyone listening, we'd be happy to meet you and help you. So the pandemic has forced that. To the second part of your question, yes, the pandemic's forced us all online. I don't want to take up too much time, but it was a good question. Really, investors are looking at sustainability. A year ago, everyone was scared to death, and so everybody pulled back. But then there emerged some clear winners that showed that life was going to go on. The very tools we're using right now with Zoom, right? I mean, this is magic, right? Our grandparents would have been shocked, right? And now it's a fact of daily life. So it's up to all of us to find those winners in the storm. And what a lot of us investors are trying to figure out, there's always debates about when the economies will reopen, or, how much people will go back to work or work remotely. But the fundamental business needs haven't changed that much. And that's what all of us are looking at, is long-term opportunities. All the companies and opportunities that hit us as investors last year around, personal protective wear, or vaccine this, or administration systems and stuff, those were tended to be quick hits, and that's not what most, at least venture type investors like myself, are looking for. We're looking for longer term plays. So a shorter answer would be the pandemic hasn't disrupted as much as I thought in terms of venture investing, but I think that's a good thing, because it means people are optimistic that there are long term opportunities here, and that we're still going to invest to help entrepreneurs change the world. I hope that was helpful.
That will surely turn into a podcast, I'm sure. But
Right.
really, thank you for sharing your valuable thoughts with us, and also for sharing some of the resources which we can really go back to and check, and also elaborating about your mastermind workshops. I'm sure. So the appropriate people will definitely seek your help with that. So thanks a lot, Scott. Frank, being the IT person on the panel, can you just tell, according to you, what is the right time to file patents for a startup? And should they be really considering protecting their IP before pitching to investors?
All right, excellent question. I'll answer the second question first. Should a startup be really filing patents before they are pitching to an investor? I would say before even sharing the idea with their friends, colleagues, or their wives or their girlfriends, what a startup company should do, or any company for that matter, or anybody who has an idea, what they should do is they should call their patent lawyer and file the idea or a patent for that idea, be it a provisional or complete, so that nobody can tomorrow claim saying that I knew this idea before you filed an application. In other words, before you disclose your idea to anybody, okay, you should file the patent application so that tomorrow you can claim the date of disclosure. And so that way you basically protect your rights, you protect your ideas before going it to the public. The reason why it's important is because patent will be allowed only and only when your idea is not present in the public domain. So if you disclose your idea to other folks, people might just Google it up. It will be available online, and people would be able to oppose you while you are seeking the protection from the government. Once you have a patent protection filed before doing that, you don't have to fear anything. I mean, you can directly walk into the investor room and show your product, your prototype, talk about your idea in detail. You can even explain the how part of your idea which startups at early stage resist to while they have a discussion across in the investors. I mean, Travis and Scott would agree on this, that most of the investors are also reluctant to sign NDAs in most part of the countries. They would feel that if you are a startup is coming to an investor, okay, and it's in startup need the funding from the investor, then why should there be really an obligation to sign an NDA? So most of the folks also reject doing that. They don't take it in a positive spirit. And if you have a patent file, you don't have to worry about anything. You can just walk into the room, talk about the idea in detail, and get the $1 million check which was waiting anyways for you, right? So having patent protection before disclosing anything to anybody is the most advisable thing. That holds true not only just for startups but for professors, for students, for companies, small and medium. Before going out to disclose anything in online or offline, try filing the patent first, and then you can of course go ahead and disclose the ideas.
Wonderful. So, to all of our audience who are listening and who have not yet protected your IP, protect first and then go on to sharing your inventions. So, that's the key takeaway. Moving on to Zafang. So, Zafang, I would like to know what is your perspective about the future of AI and machine learning, because now all domains have included AI and ML as integral part of their workspace. In a kind, AI revolution is finally at its peak, if I may say so. So, what do you think is still to be studied upon or worked upon, and what are the green areas for enthusiasts belonging to this field?
Okay, thank you. So I'm optimistic. So I will think that AI finally will serve the humans instead of conquer the humans. So I think the AI was another way of, or more intentional way of people controlling this world, instead of this is God-born stuff which will grow by itself wildly so that it will conquer and finally dominate the human races. So I think with more and more human intelligence injected into the models and the way of how the computation should be done, or how we should manipulate all the kind of machines, so that the AI will evolve stage by stage, generation by generation, and serve the people better and better. So currently, the stage of the AI is that it still has limited capabilities in a certain field, so that it can overcome the human intelligences. And those overcome the successful comes from the fact that it utilizes the historically human accumulated knowledges and the human way of how to polishing this way of how the AI was performed. So this is the current stage of the AI. Before the next stage, that the AI can develop his own way of the evolutionary. So I think even that was even a higher level of the abstraction from the human intelligence, and that if guided correctly can serve the human races, reduce the human labors, solve the lots of world problems even better, and humans can focus on their more interest stuff, develop the more way of how to do a healthy life and how to do spend more time with the family or stuff. So I was optimistic about the future of the AI, and I think currently with this guidance of our giant technologies which was developing, they are racing about how they developed in certain aspects of the AI fields, but the currently is still under the well controlled, and try to do that in a better direction of the aspect of the healthy direction for the development of the AI. Thank you.
Well, again, a very helpful thought, and thanks for sharing that with us. Moving on to Travis. So, Travis, C2 is basically continuously compliant, and we all know how important compliance is for success of any business. Can you just share your thoughts about this, as in how can a new entrepreneur know about the right compliances, the regulations, and other things which they need to adhere to during their operations? So basically, what should be their strategy for being utmost compliant? So I'm speaking about very new entrepreneurs who might be just venturing into startups.
I think I think I've got a couple answers to that. One is, if you can avoid dealing with it, do. And so a great example of that is in human resources. It is not core to our value proposition to have an amazing back office human resources department. We want to hire the best talent for sure, but I don't have time to keep up with state laws and regulations and all that stuff. So we worked with a professional employer organization, a PEO that manages all that for you. So all your filings, all your stuff is just a monthly fee per employee, and don't have to deal with it at all. It's wonderful. So I think that's a good one. I think any startup, if you can afford it, get good legal counsel early. Whether you're trying to figure out what you can patent, whether you're trying to prevent being sued, how you incorporate, all sorts of things are going to come up. Even contracts that you need to sign that have weird clauses you don't understand. The earlier you can have an attorney on board that's trusted and knows your business and can keep you out of trouble, is another good one. And then the area we're trying to do is, if you can automate it away, even better. And so we started, and I like some of Scott's, just try to do good in the world. We started with the community edition of our product that we gave away completely free, because a lot of these small to mid-sized companies cannot afford these high-end compliance tools, the Archers,
Exactly.
the ServiceNows of the world that started at $100K to several $1 million. There's no startup that can afford a tool like that. And so we thought compliance is too important to be unaffordable. So we gave out a free product, which is awesome. It helps people. It's also not 100% altruistic, right? In the sense that they also creates a pipeline. So we had over 1,700 downloads our first month. Those are people we can touch, we can follow up with, that may turn into larger companies that have larger needs. So we can help them now for free, but they may grow into wanting some of the more sophisticated paid features of our platform. And so it's important to be compliant. Regulators get a bad name, and I get it. I complain about them at times too. Every time I've got to go file a new set of forms to the state to do business, why do I have to do this 50 times in 50 states with all little tweaks? Like, it's irritating. But in general, regulators are good people. Like, they're trying to keep your air breathable, your water clean, things safe for you. Like, they have good intentions. Just sometimes there's unintended costs to businesses and other things that make it hard to compete, especially in areas that have more relaxed regulations where they can offer things at lower cost. And so our goal was not to get rid of regulations. It was to make compliance affordable by automating more of it, making it easier to understand, more approachable to more people, and making it less of a problem. And so I guess that would be my high level advice of sort of thinking through how to answer that.
Thank you, Travis. That is sheer wisdom which you have shared with us, and I'm sure all our participants will learn a lot from it. Okay, thank you very much. So we are slowly approaching towards end of our session. But before doing that, I would like to open the session for your fellow panelists. So if either one of you has any question for your companion panelists, then this is the time to shoot out those.
I have one for Scott if we want to start. So I'm new to the entrepreneurial world. I came out of big corporate and government. And so we learned a lot of lessons learned. To your point, on there are things you see on TV and read and hear from others that are completely disconnected from reality. One of the things I learned is how hard it is to get seed capital in a world of cloud, where especially on software, they expect you to do a lot of things early on because the barriers to entry are much lower than they used to be. How do you see the software world changing on seed rounds? And what advice would you give companies starting on trying to get a seed?
Well, thanks for asking, Travis. It's funny because I think my answer has a lot to do with something you said earlier. And I'll unpack that. Investors these days don't invest in ideas anymore. They invest in businesses more than ever before, by which I mean they want to see some revenue. It's just, as you said, too easy to start a business, especially a software business. You don't need $1 million like you used to. A software business 20 years ago was a big deal, but now with SaaS platforms and no code environments, and it's easier to deploy than ever. So you need to have something to show investors before they'll really even talk to you. But the answer to that is actually, I think, something you said earlier. I don't know if you saw me smiling because I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday, but the idea of testing along the way and developing proof points and validation is what you can do with little cost, right? So I think of it in terms of sort of a ramp of you have no money, no customers, no nothing, but what's the small thing you can do on an affordable basis in a short amount of time that shows something? And that could be as easy as talking to 3 potential customers and writing down their reactions, right? And then take that feedback and then talk to 10 customers. And that doesn't cost anything except 10 minutes for 10 phone calls. And so in an afternoon, you could have essentially a little focus group, at least if you're working in an industry that you're familiar with, which hopefully you are. And that kind of thing is how you build sort of a pseudo traction or fake traction that can demonstrate to an investor that you might be able to turn that into revenue traction as well. So that's the thing I've been thinking a lot about lately. I think that the beta test is the software industry's greatest gift to the business world, because it introduces this idea that, hey, we do sell things and they're not finished, right? And we need your help to test them. That was, in the 20th century, nothing left the warehouse unless it was perfect, and if it wasn't, it got returned, right? These days, you can break, move fast, break things. You can test stuff live, which means that you can get customer feedback. So the sooner you're talking to customers, and then you can use that as essentially as an asset to demonstrate to investors that you have a business that customers are not only like, but might actually be willing to pay for. That's when investors start to get interested. So I hope that was helpful. Was that?
Yes, sir.
On target?
Thank you.
I've got one for Priyank if we've got another minute. I'm always curious about the difference in strategy between filing patents versus trade secret protection, because some companies prefer, as you know, to kind of hide the ball rather than disclose anything in the public databases from the Patent and Trademark Office. What's your advice on that?
Had you asked this question to me 5 years ago, I would have said, let's keep everything secret and do not disclose anything out to the public, because otherwise people will start copying you right, left, and center. But today, with the amount of data which is anyways out in the market, and again, if you're talking about a SaaS-based or software model, then there's nothing like a secret, right? People are using open source libraries, pre-packaged software platforms, which is allowing you to code without even actually coding. So all you have got is an approach. It's your step-by-step process or an algorithm as your secret or as a secret sauce, right? And if you want to protect that, the best way is to file a patent so that nobody else can claim authority on the same amount or the same steps or the flow which you are coming up with, irrespective of the technology, irrespective of the languages which are used to develop the product. If you have the patent on the basic step itself, the basic flow chart, the algorithm itself for the softwares, then you basically stop people from entering into the same space for next 20 years, which is very easy because the federal government is giving you protection and allowing you to have that right and enjoy the fruits of that particular technology over the period of 20 years. On the other hand, if you try to keep that algorithm, for example, as a secret, I mean, I can hardly imagine that that's possible, right? So all these tech giants like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, or even IBM, they have filed so many patents, I mean, thousands of patents just for because of the fact that it's very difficult or rather impossible to keep the softwares as secret, right? Uh, Anybody and everybody can reverse engineer a piece of code very easily, right? On the other hand, if you have a product like Coke, they are able to keep the recipe of the Coke still as a secret. The formula is still a secret because the people who know it are not even meeting in person for once after they started manufacturing it, right? So if you ask Coke or if you read the stories about how much of effort, the capital intensive effort it is to keep the recipe secret, it's huge. They are able to do that because they are in that typical market, or the product allows product allows them to do so. But for startups or for mid-sized companies, keeping anything secret is next to impossible. And in today's world of data, I don't think so anybody would love to keep waiting, assuming that they have kept things secret. But the moment the product launches in the market, within a week you will see the copies or the replicas of the same product out in some other part of the world. So a patent is your basically an answer to stop all of that.
Interesting. Thank you. That's very interesting. And that's an update, as you said. So things really are moving. Thank you.
Yeah, I think at my 2 cents to his comments is that when a company grows to mid or to large size, the patent itself was actually a fighting tool against these components, so that they probably have a wall of the patents list all the things they are already applied for. That was usually a tool against the competitors, so that they want to attack each other to get a balance, a trade-offs between each other. So I do have a question for Scott, if you still have a minute. Yeah, hey Scott. So I think I ask also for the lots of audience here. So for the startups, when it grows from the A, B, C round, and in order to survive, it has to do lots of projects with other companies or do some kind of small projects. I know that you have to try to fit this project into your main directions, but lots of those directions, those projects was actually a temporary, a short-term project, and when it's come, it's gone. Nothing accumulated in the company knowledge base. So I want to ask Scott about how to balance this stuff about survive. You have to do the projects, do the contract from outside, and in order to grow a bigger company, you have to gain the knowledge base by yourself. You want to grow it bigger. How to balance this kind of stuff in the different rounds A, B, C? Thank you, Stock, for your experience.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I see it all the time because early stage entrepreneurs have enough skills to start a company and to offer valuable services, often because what they learned in their previous jobs, right? So they've got this idea, they have expertise, they have connections, they can even sell the service often back to the company that they left, right? Because they know people in the industry, but what they have all that, but they don't have revenue to actually demonstrate to an investor that it's a company, that it will grow, right? So I totally understand what you're saying. I work with, yeah, I get it. So the problem, so you have to do what you have to do, right? You have to take those, the industry lingo is non-recurring NRE or NRP, and non-recurring engineering or non-recurring projects. Investors don't like that kind of money, right? Because it's non-recurring, right? And these days we all have the luxury, as Travis and I were just talking about, like cloud-based SaaS businesses that have recurring revenue. So why would I want to invest in a company that has one-off revenues versus one that has repeatable revenues? Even if they're lower, I'd like the repeatable, right? Of course. So the challenge as an entrepreneur is exactly what you're saying too. How do you balance those two? Because you need to make payroll, you need to pay your mortgage, you need to, grow, right? And I think you know the answer is you just do it and try to learn from that and use the capital that you can get from the short-term projects to grow into a recurring business, because it's the recurring revenues that will generate the valuation that Vinashi was asking me about earlier, right? You need the recurring revenues, at least today, to demonstrate that you are a company that's growing. The other alternative, though, that a lot of people overlook, and this is again kind of the media thing, the media only talks about venture capital backed companies, which means that they're increasingly recurring revenue based and then become really big. The alternative is what we've had for centuries, which is smaller businesses that do one-off business, one-off projects on a recurring basis, but with different clients. And that's more of an agency or consulting model. And that's a totally legitimate way to build a business and even to get rich. I mean, you're probably not going to go public, on a Facebook sort of level, but there's no shame in having, 6 clients that pay you $300,000 each a year, and you take half of that for yourself and the other half you use for your team. I mean, that's a legit life that was way better than most people have. And that's absolutely a way to go. That's also one of the reasons investors are resistant to investing in a business like that, because if a founder starts something and then they start making a couple million a year, well, why would they want to change that and take all the additional risk of raising capital, hiring more people, expanding, and all the risks that entails? So investors don't like lifestyle businesses, but they can be fine for entrepreneurs. And I think that's what you're talking about, the dichotomy between an agency style or consulting business and then the growth model VC-backed business. And the difficulty as an entrepreneur is figuring out how to thread that needle so that you do some of both, and ideally enough of the consulting to fund the development of the recurring revenue, and then you get the investor money. That's the way I see it anyway.
Oh, I got it. So if I want to summarize it, is that one way is that you accumulate this knowledge into the company knowledge base. The other way is that you try to expand horizontally so that the knowledge was on the human itself, like the experiences, collections, and that kind of value is not sustainable because you cannot invest more resources and grow the same business model to create a bigger pie like that. Thank you, Scott.
That's a good way of thinking about it. I like that. Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, thank you.
Then I've got one more, just a small question. It's to Scott. So Scott, as a patent attorney, a lot of early stage entrepreneurs comes to us and they ask us the why question. Why should we have a patent? And we end up describing all the benefits of having a patent that will help you in increased valuation. It will help you to establish your USP. It will help you to bring out the unique technical aspect of your product or the service which you're offering, and also keep the competitors at bay. And one of the important point which we also share is it will please your investor. So as an investor who specializes in investing into early stage entrepreneur, how do you look at a entrepreneur walking in with a patent in his hand saying that I have got a patent protected or a patent pending technology and this is my business? How would you look at from the investment perspective? Would that impact on the increased valuation, or how's your perception when somebody walks in with a patent?
Yes, I agree with your premise is that it adds value. Yes, I agree. Patents they're a thing, right? It's an asset, and entrepreneurs at the early stage generally don't have very much. They have some relationships, some ideas, maybe some team members, and maybe a few dollars in the bank, none of which is really amounts to much, that you could resell if the company went under. A patent is a thing. It's like they owned a building or something, as you know, right? So intellectual property, that's why they call it property. So yeah, we always appreciate that. Of course, that leads to a lot of due diligence questions very quickly. What is the patent for? Obviously, has it been issued? How many years are left on it? Sometimes you see a company that's working with a patent that's already 15 years old. That's less valuable, obviously. What rights do you have to the patent, right? Is it something you are the owner of, or did you license it from someone else? If so, what's the royalty arrangement, or payouts and so forth? So there's a lot of questions around it. Not to skip over the big one, which is what does it actually do, and is it defensible, right? That's right. The big one. But yeah, that's a good conversation to have, because then you're talking essentially what you're talking about is valuation, right? Like you're not talking about, do you have anything? You're talking about what's it worth? And that's a conversation every entrepreneur prefers, right? This is, you have a thing. Okay, let's talk about how to value it. And that's good. So I say, yes, I'm thumbs up on patents if you can get them.
Mhm. All right. So get the patents and also have the patents which are defensible enough so that you can have a good negotiation at your valuation round. Excellent. Thank you so much, Scott, for that.
Sure,
I'm
happy to
sure a
help.
lot of people who are listening to us will have a takeaway from this, and
Yeah.
they would implement on the same as well. Thank you
Yeah,
so
well,
much
and
for
the piece
sharing
that
that.
might help your business, of course, is that if you have one patent, why not have 5 or 6, right? Because if you've got something smart going on
Correct.
that you figured out ahead of the rest of the market, you can build a whole wall. As Zifeng said, I think, there's a whole bunch of patents is better than one. And then
Of
you
course.
really own a corner of the marketplace.
Thanks for adding that as well. Thanks.
And then
Okay.
when you have a
So
wall full of patents, you don't care about whether it's a hidden gem inside your own pocket or it's already public to the site.
Great, great.
okay, so I guess we are done with the panelist questions. Um, so if anybody has anything else to say, or we are good.
We are good. So thank you for having me.
Sure.
Thanks for
Sure.
having us.
Okay,
Yeah.
so thank you to all panelists for giving us your precious time, sharing your knowledge. We heard everything right from your business stories to your success formulas to the philosophies which you abide by. And this has definitely been a great session. We have recorded this session and we'll be sharing snippets from these on our social media platforms wherein we'll be tagging you. So feel free to share it across, and I'm sure that way more and more audience will be reached and they'll hear you out. So once again, thank you very much. Here am I, your moderator for today, Vaishnavi Joshi, signing off. So let's catch up real soon. Stay in touch and do take good care of yourself. Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you
us.
so
Thank you for
much.
having me.
Bye, guys. Take care.
Yeah.
Have a
Bye.
good day.
Take care.